Now, in British painting, even in Reynolds's own work, drawing is not conspicuous. But what you get instead is a much freer use of colour and a much freer handling of paint. Now, under the wartime circumstances, when Turner looked at French art, which did have these qualities of rigid draftsmanship and smooth, flat colour, he said, nationality, he said, with all her littleness came upon me. He knows he's being nationalistic and it's not necessarily a good thing, but he says that in comparison with the French, they may be very good at drawing, but we are the true painters. It almost seems as if English painterly freedom came to stand for the political freedom that was missing on the continent under Napoleon.
In 1812, Turner offered another coded reference to Napoleon in a large canvas of the army of the Carthaginian general Hannibal. Barry Venning.
Napoleon wanted to encourage the French to think of him as a new Hannibal. And so the spectacle in Turner's picture of Hannibal in severe difficulties, a Hannibal who might fail rather than succeed, leaves us with an obvious parallel that Napoleon himself will fail. And of course in 1812 he launched a very ill-advised and ill-fated campaign in Russia, which was one of the principal turning points in the war and one of the reasons that he was ultimately defeated. Turner, as all of his contemporaries and colleagues, regarded Napoleon as the national enemy, but many British artists and intellectuals were absolutely fascinated with Napoleon because he seemed to represent the power of one individual will. So you do get this deep ambivalence in Turner's work. The other notable occasion which he depicted Napoleon was 20 years after Napoleon's death, in 1842, when Turner exhibited at the Royal Academy a picture called War, the Exile and the Rock Limpet. In this picture Napoleon is actually seen musing on his condition of exile in St. Helena, and the implication seems to be that in exile he has even less freedom than the limpet on which he seems to be musing. And the whole thing is set against a very blood-red and yellow sunset, and by this stage Turner was increasingly using those kinds of sunsets as indicative of bloodshed or tragedy, perhaps referring to Napoleon's imperial ambitions and their cost in human life.
Tate curator Ian Worrell.
It was a pair to a painting that he produced showing a ship off Gibraltar in which his friend David Wilkie, the genre painter, is being consigned to the sea. He died on his way back from the Middle East. And Turner's creating a kind of relationship here between the emperor, whose body had been brought back to Paris in great state in just a couple of years earlier in 1840, and Wilkie, whose body, although he was a great artist, had been consigned with little ceremony into the water. So this sense of war and peace is very strongly fixed there, and the arts as being something that can temper violent ambitions. And this is really underscored in the colour relationships of the two pictures, where the war picture is strongly coloured with these violet and crimson tones, whilst the peace subject has much calmer blues and blacks to suggest the morning. In fact, Turner was reproached by one of his colleagues that the sails of the boat were too dark, and he said he wished he had black to make them blacker.